Hey everyone, this is Jake Munger. You are listening to the Zoologist.podcast. I hope you're ready. We've got a very exciting episode on tap for today. We're going to be learning more about some of the amazing creatures that inhabit our planet. We're going to be learning facts and hearing stories, all centered around animals, all centered around the animal kingdom. I hope you're as excited to go on this journey as I am. Now let's get ready to get wild. Hello everyone, thank you so much for hopping on and listening to today's episode of the Zoologist Podcast. Hope you're having a wonderful start to your week, and I hope you're ready because today we're heading back into the deep sea and learning all about one of its most infamous and mysterious denizens. Stories of the mythical Kraken, a huge sea monster known for sinking ships and devouring their crew, have terrified sailors for generations. And today I'm here to tell you that the legends are true. Kind of. In this episode, we'll be comparing and contrasting the Kraken with what we know about its real-life counterpart, the giant squid. Let's dive in. Thank you once again for hopping on and listening to today's episode of the Zoologist Podcast. If you are a first-time listener to the show, first of all, welcome. Thank you for choosing to listen to our podcast today on your daily commute or whenever you're choosing to listen to this. We post new episodes weekly, new content all about animals. So if you like what you hear today, please be sure to follow and subscribe on your favorite streaming platform. Also be sure to leave us a rating and a review. I am always looking for ways to improve the show, make the listening experience better and better. So your feedback is extremely valuable to me. Let me know what you like, what you dislike, what you think can be improved upon, and we will do our best to create the best content we possibly can. Alrighty, let's dive into today's topic, which is the giant squid. I gotta be honest, I have been super excited to do this episode for a while now. I've been planning it ever since I did my episode about the deep sea, about deep sea creatures. It's called Under the Sea, Way Under the Sea. Highly recommend you go listen to it if you haven't already. It is one of my favorites that I've ever done. But when I was planning that episode, I was originally planning to talk more about giant squid and colossal squid. But as I thought about it, I really felt like I wanted to give these animals their own episode. Because giant squid are definitely one of my favorite marine animals, but also just one of my favorite animals generally. And what makes them so fascinating to me is the mystery that surrounds them. I mean, consider that we've known about these animals for hundreds of years, thousands of years actually. The giant squid was first scientifically described in 1857, but Aristotle was writing about these squid all the way back in 350 BC. Despite the fact that we've known about them for so long, however, we still know almost nothing about them. And it's this mystery that has led the giant squid to inspire so many different legends and myths about sea monsters in cultures all around the world, from Japan to the Caribbean. Probably the most famous of these legends is the legend of the Kraken. And the Kraken has got to be the most well-known sea monster in the world. It's found its way into pop culture. I mean, you see it in movies like Clash of the Titans and Pirates of the Caribbean. But today what I want to do is I want to compare the Kraken and what's been said about the Kraken to its real-life counterpart, the giant squid, to see what the legends got wrong, but also what they may have gotten right about these incredible animals. Let's start by talking about the history of the legend of the Kraken. Now, it's important to note that stories of sea monsters probably didn't originate with the sightings of giant squid. They might have, for all we know, but basically anywhere where a civilization has contact with the ocean, you find stories of sea monsters lurking underneath the waves. And when you think about it, it isn't difficult to see why. I mean, these are people that had no way of knowing what might live beneath the ocean's surface, and so when they caught a glimpse of something like a shark or a whale, or for our purposes, a giant squid, it must have had their imagination just running wild and absolutely terrified them. And so it was that unfamiliarity that led to these stories and legends. And with the giant squid, it was no exception, which is why you see so many stories of squid-like monsters in cultures all around the world, including in Scandinavian culture, which is where the legend of the Kraken specifically originates. Now, it's difficult to say how or when exactly the legend of the Kraken began. The earliest written account we have that mentions the Kraken comes from King Sverre of Norway in 1180 AD, and he actually listed the monster as one of many sea monsters that were apparently living in the depths surrounding Scandinavia. But of this monster specifically, he mentioned its size, how it was the size of an island, which you'll come to see is kind of a theme when it comes to the Kraken. Now, early on, the Kraken wasn't exactly what we know it as today, and in fact, it didn't even go by the name Kraken. There are many sea monsters that are mentioned in medieval texts, and these monsters are often linked back to the Kraken, such as the Hafgufa or the Linkbakar. I really hope I'm pronouncing those right. I probably butchered those pronunciations. But the thing is that these creatures were often depicted as gigantic whales. That's the other thing about the Kraken, is that it wasn't always portrayed as a gigantic octopus or squid. Throughout the centuries, the monster has also been portrayed as a humanoid, a huge fish, a sea serpent, and even a large crustacean, like a crab or a lobster. It wasn't until the 18th century that the Kraken really began to solidify its image as a huge cephalopod. So it was during the 1700s that the Kraken really began to become what we know it as today. Eric Pontoppidan, he was the Bishop of Bergen, and he is often credited with popularizing and bringing international attention to the legend of the Kraken. In his book, The Natural History of Norway, which was published in 1755, he wrote about the Kraken, and he said it was the largest sea monster in the world, and described it as being flat, round, and full of arms or branches. He goes on to say that it's likely to be an octopus or a starfish of some kind. And Pontoppidan, he wasn't the only naturalist to write about the Kraken in that time period. The Kraken actually appeared in lots of scientific literature during the 1700s and the 1800s. Hans Egede, he published a book in 1745 called A Description of Greenland, and he mentioned the Kraken in it, saying that it could be mistaken for an island or for land. And French naturalist Pierre Denis de Montfort, he wrote about the monster in his 1802 book, The History of Mollusks. He actually wrote about two gigantic cephalopods in his book, one of them called the colossal octopus, and the other being the Kraken octopus, which was much larger than the first. It was also in the 18th century that the name Kraken first appeared in writing. Now, I've seen a lot of different explanations for where the word Kraken originates. A couple sources said that it was a German word meaning dragon. One said that it was a Norwegian word meaning unhealthy animal. The one that makes the most sense to me is that it derives from a couple of different Old Norse words. One of them kraka, meaning to drag downward, and the other one kraki, which means boat hook or anchor. Now, these legends of the Kraken were told many, many times throughout the centuries, but in historical writings, in historical records, a few descriptions of the animal always manage to stay consistent. For one thing, it's always portrayed as being absolutely enormous, often said to be the biggest monster in the ocean. It's also said to live deep under the sea, often lurking at the bottom of the ocean, and it wasn't at first, but it would eventually come to be known for destroying ships and devouring their crews. The Kraken is said to have an enormous mouth that it uses to consume prey, either human beings or huge schools of fish. And interestingly, it's also been said that the Kraken is capable of creating whirlpools. According to one legend, the Kraken, if it's unsuccessful in bringing down a ship, will actually circle a ship to create a whirlpool that drags the ship down to its doom. Pontoppidan, he wrote that the Kraken could create a whirlpool simply by descending into the ocean from the surface, which could also bring down ships. It isn't all bad when it comes to the Kraken, however. It's also said to be surrounded by enormous schools of fish, which, if any fisherman is brave enough to go get close enough, can provide a bounteous haul. Now, the Kraken continued to find its way into scientific literature up until 1857, when the giant squid was scientifically described, and it looks like that effectively put an end to any notion of the Kraken's reality. Alrighty, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to learn more about the Kraken's counterpart in reality, the giant squid. Don't go anywhere. Are you a brand new podcaster, hoping to share what you're passionate about to whoever's willing to listen, but you aren't sure where to start? Navigating the logistics of your podcast can be confusing, from tracking growth to getting your podcast on the biggest platforms like Apple and Spotify. That's why I use Captivate. Captivate is a podcast publishing site that's user-friendly and offers everything you need to fulfill your podcast's full potential. They'll help you publish your podcast to all of the most popular platforms, as well as help you track your growth through daily, weekly, 28, and 90-day download numbers, as well as the averages, so you can see where your podcast might be flourishing or floundering. What's more, they'll help you with promotion and advertising. They offer free courses on how to start and run the perfect podcast, and they even throw in a free website with your subscription, completely customizable to fit your podcast's personality. You can sign up now starting at $19 a month, and you'll even get a free 7-day trial so you can decide whether or not it's right for you. Sign up today at the.zoologist.net/captivate, and what's more, you'll be supporting my show. Captivate truly is a podcaster's best friend. Welcome back as we continue our discussion. So far we've talked about the legend of the Kraken and gone over the history behind the legend, as well as some of the features that the monster is said to have. And now we're going to talk about the real-life counterpart of the Kraken, the giant squid. And as you can probably guess, the giant squid doesn't quite live up to the tall tales of its mythical equivalent, but it isn't hard to see what inspired the legends. For one thing, giant squid really are huge. They're not quite island-sized, but the largest ever found was about 43 feet, or 13 meters long, and some estimate that they can grow to be over 60 feet, or 18 meters long. Females are believed to be larger than males. They can weigh up to 600 pounds, or 270 kilograms. Males only weigh about half of that, but 300 pounds is still nothing to sneeze at. All of this taken together makes the giant squid, along with the colossal squid, the largest invertebrates that have ever lived. Now, despite their size, we know that giant squid are one of the most mysterious animals on the planet. We've talked about this extensively so far. It's one of the reasons there's so many legends based on these creatures. But just to kind of put this in perspective for you, so we've talked about how the squid was scientifically described in 1857, but scientists weren't able to get a look at these creatures in their natural habitat until 2004. That's when the first images of a live adult giant squid were finally taken by a couple of researchers off the coast of Japan. 2 years later, an adult squid was captured alive and filmed for the very first time, and it wasn't until 2012, 6 years later, that the animal was finally filmed in its natural habitat. So researchers are really only just starting to get to know squid behavior and natural history, to the point that scientists aren't even sure if there's one species or several different species of giant squid. Genetic evidence points towards there only being one, but there are some scientists who claim that there are up to 20 species of giant squid. In any case, the reason these animals are so mysterious is because of the habitat that they live in. The deep sea is a very good place to hide. This is one of the things that the legends got right. They're not quite found at the bottom of the ocean, but they can be found at depths between 650 feet and 4,500 feet. That's about 200 meters and 1,000 meters. This places them in the mesopelagic and the bathypelagic zones of the open ocean. And they're well adapted to live in this environment. For example, to help them see, giant squid have one of the biggest eyeballs in the animal kingdom. They can be about 11 inches or 27 centimeters in diameter, which is roughly the size of a basketball. These eyes help the squid pick out even the tiniest glimmers of light in the gloom. It helps them see predators, such as sperm whales that might be hunting them down, and it also helps them to be able to hunt down and look for prey. And speaking of prey, the giant squid, also happen to be powerful and opportunistic hunters, and they have a number of different adaptations that help them to be able to catch prey as efficiently as possible. By all means, it doesn't seem like they're very picky eaters. You can't afford to be when you live in the deep sea. They'll hunt down and eat deep sea fish, crustaceans, and there's even evidence that they'll eat each other, that they have cannibalistic tendencies. Among their many adaptations, they have a sharp parrot-like beak, which, along with their tongue, is perfect for ripping their prey to shreds and tearing it into bite-sized chunks. Fun fact, the squid needs to do this for evolutionary purposes. Their esophagus runs through the middle of their donut-shaped brain, and so if they bite off more than they can chew, so to speak, there's potential for a lot of damage to be done there. In addition to this, they also have 2 rows of suckers on their 8 arms, and each of these suckers is lined with a serrated ridge of chitin. And chitin is the same substance that makes up insect exoskeletons. For the squid's purposes, it's perfect for catching and disabling prey, but it's also perfect for defending themselves from predators. It's not uncommon to see sperm whales with scars from these suckers on their skin. In addition to these arms and these suckers, they also have 2 extra long tentacles that can be used for grabbing or clubbing prey from great distances. These tentacles, they actually make up the majority of the squid's body length. Just to kind of put it in perspective for you, without their tentacles, these squid rarely exceed 16 feet in length. So that should give you an idea of just from how far away these squid can attack their prey, and it helps them avoid potentially unsavory situations. If their prey decides they want to fight back, it helps them to avoid as much damage as possible. In addition to all of this, giant squid are also extremely fast. Squid move by using their flippers on their mantles, but they also get around through jet propulsion by pushing water out of their mantle cavity. All of this combined makes the squid one of the most fearsome predators of the deep sea. But the real question is, are they aggressive towards human beings? And do they have a tendency to attack ships? Well, it's important to keep in mind that there are some squid species that are known to attack human beings. For example, the Humboldt squid, which is native to the eastern Pacific Ocean, is known to attack deep-sea divers, and it's actually been given the name Diablo Rojos, or Red Devil, by local fishermen. Likewise, there are accounts of aggressive behavior in giant squid, including attacking ships. Just to give you a few anecdotes, in 1873, it was reported that a giant squid attacked 2 fishermen off the coast of Newfoundland. They claimed they fought it off with a hatchet, and they had a 19-foot-long tentacle to prove it. During the 1930s, a cruiser belonging to the Norwegian Royal Navy was attacked on 3 separate occasions by giant squid, and each time the squid was killed by the ship's propellers. And then even as recently as 2003, a giant squid was reported to have attacked a French yacht. In one account, this was really interesting to me, a giant squid was even said to have circled a vessel before attacking it. If they often display this kind of behavior, it's not difficult to see where those whirlpool legends came from. In each of these cases, the squid was unsuccessful in bringing the ship down, but it's not far-fetched to think that these squid could bring down a smaller vessel if they tried, thus lending a hand to these legends that have spread throughout the centuries. Now, there's a couple things to keep in mind. First of all, attacks from a squid, any squid, from any species, are extremely rare. And attacks from giant squid are even more rare because these animals are rarely ever seen at the surface. If you see a giant squid at the surface, it's probably stressed and dying. These animals can't survive at the surface for very long because they can't breathe properly in shallower waters. But as rare as these attacks might be, it would probably only take a couple of attacks on medieval ships for a legend to be born. So from these anecdotes, we can probably guess how these legends might have begun. All right, there is one more thing I want to bring up before we conclude. I brought up colossal squid a couple times, and I feel like they're worth a mention. There's not much to say. We know even less about these squid than we do about giant squid, but they are worth mentioning for our purposes here today. Colossal squid were first discovered in 1925 when their remains were found in the stomach of a sperm whale. It's unlikely that these squid were going around inspiring many legends because colossal squid are found, their primary habitat is the waters off the coast of Antarctica. So not a lot of chance for them to run into human beings. Colossal squid are even bigger than giant squid, as the name would suggest, and they're even more terrifying. They can reach lengths of 46 feet long, 14 meters, and weigh well over 1,000 pounds, or over 450 kilograms. And instead of serrated chitin, their suckers are equipped with rotating hooks that are used to grasp onto prey and fight off predators. But fortunately, like I said, interactions with humans are rare, even more rare than giant squid encounters. So it's unlikely that you're going to be pulled under by a colossal squid anytime soon. Well, as you can see, giant squid aren't quite the ship-destroying, sailor-devouring monsters that they've been portrayed as for centuries. But nonetheless, they're still one of the most fascinating creatures of the deep sea, and one of the most mysterious. When you have an animal that we know this little about, that we see so rarely, it isn't too much of a stretch to say that these animals are still walking the boundary between myth and reality, and in some cases are just as legendary as their centuries-old counterpart. Thank you so much once again for hopping on and listening to today's episode of the Zoologist Podcast. I had a great time this week learning more about giant squid and their legendary counterparts, the Kraken. If you would like to learn more about the giant squid or the Kraken, I'll be leaving a few of the resources that I used in the episode show notes, so go ahead and check those out if you get a chance. Also, if you have an animal that you would like to learn more about, go ahead and reach out to me on Twitter. You can find us at the.zoologist.net/Twitter. You can also email us at the.zoologist.podcast@gmail.com. Have a wonderful rest of your week, and as always, have a wild day.